Hello everyone and welcome to yet another podcast. This is number 34 and it's been a while since we talked. Close to a month and a half actually. And that has to do with Summer, who's been here. And we've been on vacation and laying in the sun and... Yep. So, but now we're back and this time we have a really great episode for you. We have some interesting news from what's happened this summer. And we have a guest who you probably know. His name is Bev Vincent, King expert, who's been doing and seeing and reading everything that has to do with King. He's going to tell us about his visit to the set of Haven, Season 5, and he's going to join us in our discussion of Under the Dome, Season 2, the 7 first episodes. So if you haven't seen Haven and Under the Dome up to episode 7 from Season 2, you might want to check that out because we are going to spoil things for you if you haven't. So it's good to be back, but let's start with the news, right?
Welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room.
Absolutely. And we've got, as Hans said, lots of news. It's great to be back. You guys are in for a great show. We had an awesome conversation with Bev about all those things that Hans just mentioned. But before we get to that, let's start with the news. And the first item is The Prisoner #1. And if you go to Hans' site, you can see some artwork from the Dark Tower drawing of The Prisoner comic book. It's without really any context. I don't recognize who the kids are and the driver of the car, so I guess you'll have to read the comic book to see what it's all about.
Yeah. And an excerpt from the first issue has also been released as a PDF. You can download, and I think it's the first 8 pages or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've checked it out, and I don't know, it could be good, but it really doesn't feel like the drawing of a third as it's supposed to be based on. But I don't know, they have added, I think, some things to Eddie's character from when he's young, and well, I guess we're going to see what they cook together, but I think we'll see. Have you read it? I haven't actually read all the comics that's been published, but I think I will check this one out. I like the drawing, the style of it, so I might actually check this one out.
Okay.
Next up, Mr. Mercedes. We have just finished the book, or almost just, and now we learn that it will be a 10-episode TV series. And this was mentioned by the moderator at King's official message board. So it hasn't actually been announced how, when, where, who will be in it. So we doesn't know very much about it, but based on what you're going to hear in our later conversation with Bev Vincent, I think it's safe to say that we are pretty happy that it will be just a 10 episodes, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And we hope that it covers the book.
Yeah.
The whole book, not just part of it.
Yep.
So, yeah, because King's got 2 other books for that series to go. I'm assuming that the second book will be out in time for them to start filming the second season. It should be. And hopefully, I guess that puts a bit of pressure on King to get the third book done, but I don't think that's a lot of pressure for him. We're not talking George R.R. Martin here. We're just talking Stephen King's got a solid work ethic. I mean, he's been put out 2 books a year for the last couple of years now, so I'm sure he'll get it done, all 3 books done in time for if they do 3 seasons of the series as well.
Yeah, might already be done.
Wouldn't put it past him.
Nope.
All right. Next, we've reported on this in the previous podcasts, but there looks like they're going to go ahead with the Shining prequel, The Overlook Hotel, and director Mark Romanek has been attached to this project back in late July. I don't think we've had any further updates since then, that he was in negotiations to direct it, and this is going to be a prologue based on the prologue that King had that was originally cut from the book. So it's going to be focusing Jack and Danny, and it's going to be about the first owner, Bob T. Watson, who was a robber baron at the turn of the 20th century. So it's got some interesting people behind it. Glenn Mazzara, who's really branching out from his days as just being a visual effects guy, being a showrunner on The Walking Dead. He's apparently written the script. And we know Romanek, who's done some previous horror work. He also did the movie 1 Hour Photo with the late Robin Williams, which was a fairly decent thriller. And he also directed the pilot for Lock and Key. And I'd really love to see that pilot. It still hasn't.
Yeah.
It still hasn't surfaced anywhere that I've seen. I'd really like to see that, because I think there's talk now about that being done as a movie this time. So I think he's a solid choice for doing this. I just again have to come back to the original premise about, is it really worth doing this project in the first place? Because it's one of those things where we know the story beforehand. So it's going to be hard to have any surprises in it that can make us look at The Shining and Dr. Sleep differently. So I don't know. I'm less excited for this than I am for other projects, but it looks like there's good people attached to it.
Yeah, and from what I read online, King isn't very happy about this being done either. So maybe they should check into how that went for Stanley Kubrick to do something King wasn't interested in. But I have to mention also, and this is really not related to this, but you mentioned Lock and Key. This October, the movie Horns by Joe Hill, was also done Lock and Key. That's why I got to think about it. Will be released, and I don't know if you have read that book, but I thought it was a great book. And,
yep, I did.
I have really high hopes for this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I guess it all really depends on Daniel Radcliffe. Can he shed the Harry Potter image?
Yeah. I was very disappointed when I first heard that he was going to play the lead, but since then I've seen some photos of him with the horns, and there's even been a trailer released, and I have to admit that I'm getting more and more positive with him doing this. So hopefully he can pull it off.
Yeah, I liked Horns. It's not my favorite Joe Hill book. I like the other two better, Heart-Shaped Box, and I really loved his last one, Nosferatu. So
yeah.
But maybe it's good that they start with this one, and hopefully it will lead to his other. I'm sure it's going to happen at some point that his other books will be turned into movies as well. And I'd really want to see a Lock and Key, either as a movie or as a TV show. I mean, I don't know if anybody out there is into watching a lot of horror on TV, but I highly recommend Penny Dreadful, just an 8-episode series that was on Star, I believe, starring Emma Green and Timothy Dalton and Josh Hartnett. And it was a fantastic series, very atmospheric and very cinematic looking. So there's a lot of good stuff out there. And as you'll hear when we talk about Under the Dome and Haven, the proliferation of outlets for works to be adapted, whether it's on cable or streaming services like Amazon or Netflix, a lot of these things that before that I don't think we would ever see filmed. I think there's a market for it now, and that's really exciting. So I'm hoping for a lot of these works from Joe Hill and King to get adapted in various other ways as well.
Yeah. Okay, back to news. As we know, today it is 86 days left until King's new book Revival is released. And during the last week, King's UK publisher, Hodder and Stoughton, has revealed their cover for the book. And they did it as an online experience where they had the cover published on their Facebook page and only revealed parts of it. And the more people who, I think, liked it or follow it or something, the more the cover was revealed, and finally it was totally revealed. And I think it took like 2 days or something. So it went pretty quick. And personally, I think this cover is better than the US cover.
Yeah, no contest.
Yeah, exactly. So it gives some clues to the novel. We don't know much. We know that some lightning will happen, and there's a tent. It looks like a circus tent to me.
I think it's more like a revival tent, like a because the other cover has one with, I think it's a Dutch cover, right? It has one with a church. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
There you have it. And as you will know, Bev will later on in this show mention something about the book that you might want to, that will definitely make you want to check it out more than you want now. Believe me.
Yeah.
So keep listening for that.
Yeah, it was kind of funny when the email came out because I forwarded it to Hans. I said, this cover is looking like the other cover. I mean, because they were only showing the part that showed the lightning bolt. So
yeah.
And then as it went on and it started to reveal more things, I thought, okay, now we've got something. So I'm not really a big fan of the U.S. cover. Interestingly enough, there are people who have commented on your site that said they actually like the U.S. cover better, but
yeah,
to me, it's just a generic. Who hasn't seen that kind of a lightning bolt shot before? It looks like something they stole off the Weather Channel.
Actually, if you look at the UK cover for the Stand Uncut, the first hardcover edition, they are very, very much alike. It's almost like they've taken that and changed the title and darken it a little, and you almost have the same cover.
Alrighty. So our next item up, King is well known for his charity work. He did a lot of it in Maine, and he's continuing that in Florida. He's going to be at a fundraising benefit to benefit the Manatee County Public Libraries. And that will be on January 29th at the Performing Arts Centers in Manatee and Bradenton. And the foundation that he's doing this for, the Manatee Library Foundation, they're hoping to raise $100,000 towards a new library operating system for managing their catalog. So there's a lot of us who go south in the winter. Bradenton is one of the prime locations. My dad's going to be there, and maybe I can talk him into going and taking some pictures for me. But yeah, I would be almost willing to spend the money to fly down there and stay with my dad and go see him, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, you shouldn't miss a chance like that. Okay, next item is the remake of Pet Sematary. And we've just learned that Jeff Buhler, I hope I pronounced that right, is going to be involved in the movie. And they are talking about having a first draft of the script this summer. And what that really means, we don't know. It could be forever before the movie is done anyhow. But it's been talked about for a long time, and I know there have been quite a different number of scripts done where they have changed the story more or less. But what they mention in this article here is that they are going to be very respectful to the book. So hopefully this can be a movie that's true to the book, and by doing that it will probably be a pretty dark movie, and I think that could be good. Then again, the original is quite good movie, so maybe they should spend their money doing another movie. I don't know.
Well, you know, as he mentions elsewhere in the article, he does say that movie is a product of its time, and I agree with him.
Yeah.
I do think there's some really strong parts of the original version, but there also, unfortunately, are some weak parts. And I think that this is a story that is timeless. It's kind of like the monkey's paw. And there's a lot of people today that never have heard of the original Pet Sematary movie, have never seen it. And I think a up-to-date, updated movie with modern day sensibilities. This is a very powerful story that will just hit as hard now, if not more, than it did back then. I mean, of course, we were kind of hoping the same thing with Carrie, the remake, and that never really happened. But
no.
Again, like King has said, it doesn't affect the book, and it won't affect the other movie. And if it turns out better, then it's win-win all around. So, from a fan's perspective, there's no downside. I mean, we could end up with a great version of this movie. And if it's bad, then we still have the book in the original movie that if you like that, it's still going to be there on the shelf for you to go back and look at.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so now we're turning to television. And we've got a couple of Haven items up at Han's site that you can check out. Got a couple of publicity photos up there, which are not very revealing, but that's fairly normal. One's just a cast picture. And I guess Adam Copeland has made it to be part of the regular cast because he's included in the picture. So, and he's still wearing the sheriff's vest. So he still has his trouble. Yeah, and he still has his trouble. And the other one's just a picture of Nathan with a pair of binoculars, and behind him, Audrey Mara is holding a gun on him. So, and if you've watched the trailer, we have some hints as to where the story's going in season 5. So we'll have to see how that plays out. I'm actually very interested to see what they're going to do this season with that character.
Yeah.
And the final bit of Hazen news is that the season 4 DVD will, like previous seasons, include a small comic, and it's getting pretty close to the release date. It's only a couple of weeks. Today's August the 17th when we're recording this. The DVD's coming out at the end of the month, just in time for you to rewatch the whole season before season 5 starts on September 11th. So the cover is actually pretty cool. I like it.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, they had the cover, or they had a comic like this for third season as well, and they used that as a bridge between the second and third season. So it will be interesting to see if it's the same here, or if it's more like a backstory, because it gave me that feeling a little bit that it might be more about the William backstory there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I guess we'll see in a couple of weeks.
Yep. Great high fives all around.
Yep. The next news item is about a documentary called Unearthed and Untold, The Path to Pet Cemetery. And this is a documentary about the movie version of Pet Sematary. And I've been reading about this for like the past year and how they've been interviewing people involved. And I think this can be really, really interesting documentary. It will premiere on September 13 at Hancock, Maine as a movie. And hopefully it will be distributed on DVD so we can all enjoy it. There's been no information about date or how or when yet, but the fact that it's been shown at the theater is definitely a step in the right way.
Absolutely, and it's looks like a very in-depth production. So,
yeah,
and that film holds a special place for a lot of us. So I would look really forward to the behind the scenes, anything that they've uncovered about that film. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
And for our last bit of news items, this one's a little bit lighter in tone, but every year, they publish the most powerful celebrities, and Forbes magazine has printed such a list. And if we look at that list, we find, of course, Mr. King is on it. And too surprisingly, among authors, he's ranked at number 4. And his ranking is probably, it's interesting because I think his is built on a big body of work, whereas the other ones are more later authors that have made it big with one series or particular. I'm thinking of J.K. Rowling specifically here.
Yeah.
So her series is so popular, but it's really just that one series. And I think the fact that King has managed to be so high on this list and for such a long time, it's just a testament to his staying power as a writer. So, but a lot of writers make their name with one series, and they can't really get out of that or break that. They get typecast into that genre. And King has, except for this year with Dr. Sleep, which is, I guess, is really his first sequel, and The Dark Tower, he's done it creating individual, unique pieces of fiction, which is really amazing.
Yeah.
Especially this far along. And he's number 82 on the list of world's most powerful celebrities. So I don't think we'll see another writer like him come along and be this relevant and this powerful for such a long time.
No.
Because media is getting more and more fragmented, and I think people are going to rise and fall a lot quicker or make their name with one thing, and that's really all they're going to be known for. But he's done it by just an amazing breadth of work, and that's something that we won't see again.
Yeah, and I really don't know how they judge what criteria they have to fill to be powerful. But the first author, James Patterson, I know, and number 2 is Dan Brown, I know. Number 3, though, John Green. I have never heard of him. I don't know if you have, but it would be interesting to see what he has done that could outmatch King.
Right.
I guess that if you are powerful, you would be recognized by a lot of people. If that is how they judge this, I don't know. Maybe he owns a publishing company and are powerful because of that, but I don't know. Do you know of him?
I'm just trying to look him up now. It says here's the author of The Fault in Our Stars, which is a young adult novel that was just released as a movie. So I don't know if this is the same guy. It's kind of hard to believe. He's only 36 years old.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I've got the right John Green, but...
Yeah, I clicked on him at Forbes, and it seems like it's the right one. He's 36.
Yeah, he's got 25 books out, all highly ranked. I can't say that I've heard of him, but he's apparently very big in the young adult market. So
yeah, I think if it's the one I think about, The Fault in Our Stars, It's a love story which follows the trials of two cancer-stricken teens.
That's right.
Yeah, and if that's the same movie I'm thinking about, it has the Swedish title that would translate to something like "Soon I Will Explode," I think. That's how good we are at translating movies.
Wow.
And
I'd be scared to read some of your King translations.
Yep. And I know that has been a big movie here among teenagers, but still, I don't really understand how he could outweigh King.
Yeah. Well, the trick is, will he be on the list next year?
Yeah, and it's interesting to see as well that James Patterson, the first author, he's at number 37. And then there's a gap. We have Dan Brown, 78, John Green, 79, King, 82, and J.K. Rowling's 84. So it's a pretty big gap between the number 1 and 2 to 5. So it would be very interesting to read about how they judge this.
Well, I'm sure they can estimate their income, probably based on their tax returns or something.
Yeah. So it's the more money you make, the more powerful you are.
We have to bear in mind, this is strictly Forbes is a financial magazine. So that's just one measure of how powerful an author is. And I think there's other authors that make a lot less but have a bigger social presence in the media. So it's just really a numbers poll. It's not really what kind of personal power do they have in the media, because I think there's other authors that would place much higher, and across the other categories as well. So this is strictly an earnings comparison, which is it's a measure of power, but it's not the full package.
No, and it's always hard to judge how much power. I mean, if you would go out in the world and ask, do you know who Stephen King is? I bet a lot of people would say yes, and even more than if you ask, do you know how John Green is?
Yep, I think we just proved that.
Yeah, but then it's hard. I can imagine that a lot of people know, like George R.R. Martin, now because of the TV series that haven't read the books. So, it's hard to judge and draw some conclusion based on that.
Yep, absolutely, for sure. All right, so that is the news.
Yeah.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around and pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the night shift.
Hello, everyone. We're here to talk about Season 5 of Haven, which is going to be premiering in September. I believe it is September 11th. Is that the right date?
That's right. It's moved to Thursday night for the first time.
All right. And you may, if you've listened to previous podcasts, recognize that voice. That is the one and only Bev Vincent, the self-professed Stephen King expert. Hey, Bev.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. And of course, we have my partner in crime, Hans. How you doing, sir?
I'm fine.
Great.
Good to be back talking again. It's been a while.
Yes. So Bev went on an interesting summer trip this year. He actually got to visit the set of Haven. But before we get into that, we're just probably, I think it'd be good to compare notes about what everybody's feeling about where the series is at and their expectations of what we're going to see in Season 5. So Hans, why don't you tell us what you're feeling about the series at the end of Season 4 and what are you looking forward to in Season 5?
Yeah, first I want to ask you a question, since I'm not in the US and I don't know how if it works in Canada, but is it a bump up or bump down to be moved to Thursdays for the show?
I would say it's a bump up.
Yeah.
Thursday used to be one of the highest rated nights for most television. It's not quite that anymore, but Friday night is a little bit of a dead zone. No pun intended. Shows that get sent to Friday, if they get sent to Friday night, it doesn't show much faith in them. Although the series Hannibal airs on Friday night, and it's not getting the audience I think it should, even though it's an excellent series. So yeah, a lot of people don't watch TV on Friday night.
Yeah. So it means they believe more in the show now than they did earlier?
I would say so. That coupled with the fact that they've gone to a 26 episode season, which is a real big bump for them.
Mm-hmm. And plus it got renewed for 2 seasons, so that's also a big sign of faith. So
yeah, and it's fun because we almost thought that it would be cancelled after the last season because we didn't hear anything about it for a while. So, but we got surprised.
Yeah, I guess there was some big negotiations going. They must have been trying to leverage the new series that they're trying to kick off. And so maybe those was all tied together. That's why the negotiations took a bit longer. Anyhow,
Yeah.
so what do you think of where things stood at the end of season 4, Hans?
Well, personally, I thought it would be very difficult to continue after season 4 because, well, a lot of them jumped down the hole, and Audrey is not Audrey, and my hopes was for them to all jump in the hole, and we were going to see how that world looked like. But having seen some pictures from the upcoming season, I don't think that will happen. So it's and this is not that very uncommon with this show. I remember, I'm not sure between which season, but I know we talked about it then, and we couldn't see how they were possibly going to be able to move on in a satisfying way. But they did, so I have every confidence that they will find a good solution to what happened in the ending of season 4 and what will happen in season 5. But it's hard to predict what will happen.
Right. How about you, Bev?
I've just gone on a big rewatch of the entire season, the whole series, actually. I started back in episode 1 of season 1, and since I've come back from the set, I've watched everything up until I've only got about 3 episodes left to go in the 4th season. And it's a really good refresher. So looking at the transition from 4 to 5, if you remember what happened at the end of season 3 to 4, season 4 started with Audrey being Lexi in the barn.
Yeah.
And it took them a good number of episodes to, well, first of all, to get her out of the barn, and then to get her to transition back into being Audrey from everybody's point of view. Although she always was, for a long time, she was pretending to be Lexi. And now, at the end of season 4, we have this new character, Mara, and given how many episodes they've got to play with, they could go a good long time before they decide what they're going to do with Mara versus Audrey.
Do you know how far they are in taping the shows now? Are they done with season 5?
When I was there in June, they were doing 2 episodes at a time, 7 and 8. I believe they're now up to like 10 and 11. So they're probably close to the end of the first 13. Now, I don't know if they're going to split it into 13 this year and 13 next year. Even the people I talked to on the set weren't quite sure what Sci-Fi was going to do with it. But my suspicion is that they're probably going to do 2 13-episode half seasons like some other shows have done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, how did it work when you saw all episodes for all 4 seasons in one row? Did they work together, or because it's different when you see one season a year and you tend to forget some details?
Exactly
that maybe...
so, and it's really good. I mean, I think I would recommend it to just about anybody. There are little details that you really do forget. So, for example, in season 4, when Jennifer finds her birth parents, she finds the house and she gets the box of belongings and she finds that book among the box. I mean, I don't think I appreciated at the time that was the book that Audrey was reading in the very first episode of the very first season. And those sorts of long reaches backwards, when you watch the series in close proximity, you pick up a lot of little things. And it really does hold together. There's a lot of... I think the people don't give the series as much credit as it deserves on some level, because there's a lot of clever stuff going on.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are disappointed in the series because the fact that it started out like a adaptation of Colorado Kid, and now it really doesn't have anything with the book to do. So I think a lot of people dismiss it because it's no longer based on the Stephen King book, instead of appreciating for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the very beginning they've diverged radically from the book, although they have kept the thread of the Colorado Kid going. And again, one of the things I realized is, the details that we learned about the Colorado Kid in the TV series, where he came from in Colorado, who his wife was, even though those were used in different ways, they were all very true to the novel. I mean, Arlo really was the Colorado Kid's wife in the novel. He really did come from Nederland, Colorado. So there's all that, plus then all of these other Stephen King tie-ins that they've interwoven into it. Some of them very overt, like the scene at the beginning of one episode where Georgie's playing with his yellow slicker on with the paper boat and it goes down the drain, and very clearly a nod. But a lot of character names come from various King works. And they're not just arbitrarily chosen. They chose that name because the character in that short story and novel bore some resemblance to what was happening in that particular episode.
Cool. So what are your thoughts about where the series is at the end of season 4?
One thing the series has always sort of done is they've ended the season wrapping up the business and then leaving us on the hook. So I think that was the end of season 2 where there's the gunshot aboard Duke's boat and you just wonder, did Duke shoot Nathan?
Mm-hmm.
And then, at the end of season 3, it's got Duke jumping into the collapsing barn. So,
Mm-hmm.
they'd sort of wrapped up a bit of business and then left us on the hook. And then, of course, at the end of season 4, we're ended up with, well, the William situation has been sort of taken care of, but now we've got the Audrey situation with Mara. And, I'm really intrigued. I do know some of what's going to happen in 5 that I can't talk about, but I'm still very intrigued to see what they're going to do with it.
Yeah, I think for me, I enjoyed the season for the most part. I did struggle a bit with the Mara character because we were just told about her constantly through season 4, and we never really got to know what she was like. That we were hinted at that she was an evil character, but it was never really shown to us, so it was a black hole. And from the trailer I've seen for season 5, it looks like we're going to explore her character a lot more, and I wish they had done that more in season 4 to set up the conflict that happened at the end of the season. And also, I was disappointed for Nathan's story arc in season 4. He just really was pining for her all season. He didn't really have anything to do. So Duke had a good story arc, and some of the new characters that they introduced were interesting. So I'm hoping in season 5 that they're going to give Nathan something interesting to do besides, trying to find Audrey. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
He really was sort of a sad sack. I mean,
yeah,
through most of season 4, he just wanted somebody to kill him.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of viewers were probably rooting that they might put him out of his misery because he really was, he was not in a good state.
Yeah.
But, some of the characters that they've introduced that I've really enjoyed, the one that I like the most, and Lou, you're probably more familiar with her, is the new coroner.
Yes.
Gloria.
Absolutely.
And,
yep.
of course, Jane Eastwood for Canadians is one of the classic old SCTV actresses, and she's just everywhere.
Yeah.
And when talking to the people on set, they said, she steals every scene she's in. She's just got this wisecracking, funny delivery, world weary but bemused attitude, and she just sort of picks the series up whenever she's in it.
Yeah, I mentioned that to Hans when we were talking about this season 4 last year, because he obviously doesn't know who she is, but I said as a Canadian, I was getting quite the kick out of seeing her character. And we were kind of wondering if the other coroner was going to have some sort of deep secret, but he just disappeared. And her
he took
arc
off with the cats.
Yeah, her arc played out really well. And I think probably the most powerful episode was that, I think it was the second last one, where they had to kill the father to save the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really well staged because it happened off scene, and then you see Duke come back on, and then her reaction to the whole thing. To me, that was the most emotionally powerful moment in the whole season 4. So I thought that was really well played out.
Yeah, but her whole story line, she used to work with Nathan's father, and then she said she went off to Club Med Ixtapa for a while to drown her experiences in Haven, and then they brought her out of mothballs, and she said, "Yeah, I like being in mothballs." she's just hilarious.
Yes, she was.
The character of Jennifer, I don't think we're going to see anymore.
Oh.
I think Eric Balfour tweeted that the actress's decision. I think she's from either Australia or New Zealand. And just being that far away for those extended periods of time, I believe that's what I took away from one or more of Eric Balfour's tweets.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because we're still unclear at the end of season 4 who's lived and who's died, so that will be interesting to see. And
which is always a good setup for contract negotiations.
Yes, absolutely. Well, just one more question before we get into your set visit. What are our thoughts on the two guys that run the newspaper? I think me and Hans are not really too happy with where those characters are sitting right now.
No, I think they are turning into something very strange, and I don't know. It really doesn't work for me. It seems like they know everything in town, and I guess they do, and they refuse to tell anybody anything. And we have talked about it earlier that we wanted them to be beaten to pulp to get them to speak. And I mean, everybody seems to know that they know, but nobody asks them, and they don't tell. So it's a little frustrating, I think.
They are very frustrating characters, and they've been that way from the beginning. and they don't always see eye to eye themselves with what information they should divulge and which information they shouldn't. You know, the whole revelation that Vince was the head of the guard, you know, that sort of bubbled out at some point. And Dave's got this journal from Cabot that he wants Vince to read, and Vince doesn't want to read it. And so they don't even see eye to eye themselves about what they want to reveal. But Audrey clearly knows all along that they know a lot more they're saying, and she's not very happy with them about it. But yeah, I mean, they are frustrating, but I think they've evolved. In the first series, they were almost like comic relief, and they've really turned into a bit of a Greek chorus. The all-knowing ones in the background, and they sort of whisper at each other about things that the audience needs to know or needs to at least be worried about. Yeah, I agree completely. They're frustrating, but I think I get a kick out of them too.
They're good actors in that. It's just, especially like Dave's reveal that he had been through this portal before, stuff like that, and Vince being the head of the guard, it just comes out of left field. Like there's no build up to it, and you're just kind of going, "What? Wait, where?" So, which I
wonder if they make that up as they go, or if they have a grand plan for them.
It's hard to say.
Throughout,
I think it's always a combination.
Yes, I agree.
I think some things. I mean, clearly, a lot of series like this, they get developed in the writer's room, and they sit around and they talk about the big picture of the season without always nailing down the finer points along the way. And then as they break down each individual episode, some things come up among the group, and then I'm sure the writer or the individual writers who do that particular episode add their own little things as they're fleshing it out. And I think there's a certain element of it, you know, being made up as they go along. The people who did Lost admitted that. They might have had a big picture concept, but a lot of the little things, they were making them up as they went along. And sometimes it's organic, and sometimes it comes out of left field because they need something like that for that particular episode.
Yeah. Which is what Dave's reveal in this season felt like to me. Vince's felt a little more thought out beforehand, but
I mean, even the whole concept of the guard. You wonder how much that was there, but when you look at the opening credits from the very first episode on, that maze symbol has been there right from the very beginning. It's on the tombstone in the opening credits. So they must have had some use for that in mind.
All right. Any other thoughts before we get into your set visit? Hans or Vince? Or Bev? Sorry. I'm looking at your name, Vince. Vincent. Yeah. Anything else, Hans?
I'm looking forward to hear about the set visit.
Okay, cool. So, Bev, why don't you tell us all about what you did on your summer vacation?
On my summer vacation, yeah. So, I lived in Halifax for a good number of years back, most of the 1980s. And so I went on a vacation with my daughter this year. We spent a week in the Maritimes. And I've been corresponding with Charles Ardai, who's one of the executive producers of Haven. And he's actually the guy who published Colorado Kid through Hard Case Crime. We've corresponded since before Colorado Kid came out as a novel. And every now and then I'd say, you know, it'd be fun to go visit the set. And so when I realized we were going to be in Halifax at the end of June, I asked him if we could arrange that. And through various channels and sub-channels and lots of email, we were able to get this set up. The unit publicist was the one really who coordinated the whole thing once it got rolling. And so we spent an entire day in the area where it's filmed, which is about 40 minutes southwest, I guess, of Halifax. Out of the week that we were in the Maritimes, it was the only day that we had torrential rain. It just absolutely poured the whole day. And we couldn't reschedule because this was the last day they were filming before taking a week and a bit off because it was July 1st and July 4th were coming up the following week. So they were taking that whole span off to give people a break. And so there were only a couple of the main stars around, Lucas Bryant and Emily Rose. Everybody else had pretty much gone back home. So we got into Chester on, early on, this was a Thursday morning. The main sound stage is in the Chester hockey arena. And they've got two stages. The left-hand side is the skating rink hockey arena, and the right-hand side is the curling rink. And so things like the police station and the interior of the hospital, the interior of Duke's boat, and Audrey's apartment, those are all on the sound stages there. And so we got.
Do they build them up in those ice skates room?
Yep, it's all built up inside there. And it's built so that they can take it down, because when they finish shooting, they have to store it away for the hockey and the curling to take place. But during the summer, those arenas aren't being used, so it's really a good situation for both of them. It makes the arena useful year-round. But yeah, I mean, these are full-sized. I mean, you can walk through the entire Haven Police Department. It's a contiguous set. You can go to the jail, you can go up the hall into the interrogation room, and into the chief's office and all of that. And then the hospital, you can walk down the hall and you can go into the morgue and into the various patient rooms. And what's interesting is that they build these sets with the future in mind, so they'll put doors in that don't go anywhere, because there's always the possibility that in a season or two from now that they might need a new room, so that door all of a sudden goes somewhere.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. And so if you're in Audrey's apartment, which is above the Grey Gull, if you look out the door, they've got this huge, super life-sized photograph of that little island that you see off in the water. So if you're inside the apartment looking out, you see the waterscape. But the Grey Gull itself is a real physical building. It used to be a fishing shack, and it's down this very steep driveway, and you go there, and it looks exactly like it does on TV. The inside of Duke's Bar is fully set up like you see on television. So that's sort of like a living set. It's not on the soundstage. It's out in Chester community. And the other one that's like that is the Haven Herald. They have that set up in a little storefront place on the main street of Chester. And you go in through the door, and there's Vince and Dave's desk facing each other, and all of the file cabinets. And if you go into the back room, their bicycle built for two is there, and the printing press and all of that.
Are those always there, or are they taken down? Or
well, I mean, the Grey Gull is always there for sure. I suspect that Haven Herald is always there too. I don't think that it gets repurposed into anything else when they're gone. I think it's always set up. What's really funny is the way that they do the set decorating. There's all sorts of little inside jokes and funny things. So like if you look behind the desk where Vince sits, there's what looks like a card catalog from a library. And you never see it on television, but if you go up and look real close, the little index cards on every one of those is either the title of a King book or a date or something like that that's significant from one of King's stories. And in the police station, if you pass by the board and they've got all the wanted posters up, usually those are members of the crew. And if somebody did something wrong on the set someday, his punishment is he gets to be put up as a child molester or a murderer or a kidnapper or something like that. So they have a lot of fun with things like that.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that they put so much work and detail into stuff that even if it's shown, people won't know or recognize on TV.
Absolutely, except probably somebody sitting at home, he says, "Hey, that's Bob. I know him."
Yeah. Well, high def now, you have to be careful, right?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
And the other funny thing is how the tricks of television. So the Haven jail, which my daughter and I were put in, we were photographed behind bars. That's just wood. And so you realize when you hear them sliding the door open and it's got this metallic sound and it bangs and all that, you realize that's all Foley work that's done after the fact.
Right.
And to give it that legitimacy. And the brick walls, they're just foam or wood. The stripes, the floor of Duke's boat has these pinstripes, these beige pinstripes, and that's just tape. But it's a lot of tape. They have to go to a lot of work to lay that tape down to make that parquet floor.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff's just fascinating. But one of the drivers whose main responsibility is to shuttle the talent around and get them to the set and back from the set and over for lunch and all that. They gave us to him for the morning, and he took us around to all of the locations that they've used around Chester and Lunenburg, and there's another community in between, Mace's Harbor, I think it is. And so we got to see the exteriors that they use, the streets that appear quite often, the hospital, which is just the exterior, the interiors on the soundstage, some of the houses. So like there was the season 3 episode in the haunted house. We got to see the exterior of that little house. And it looks so small and remarkable in real life, and you realize how camera angles and setups and all that made it look like it was 10 stories tall and as huge as a mansion. You see the street where the big boulder rolled down it in the first season, and the little shop where the bistro is, and those are all things that are just set up temporarily. The Haven Police Department, the exterior, that's the Lunenburg Town Hall. and they just put up the Haven Police Department's sign on top of it when they want to shoot the exteriors. And if you watch the whole thing back to back to back, you start to realize that there's a lot of stock footage. So you see the same guy getting pulled up the stairs to the police department over and over again over the years. And, we didn't get to see Duke's boat because it sank.
Oh.
This old rusty junker that they had.
Is that a spoiler?
No. I mean, the actual boat that they used sank. So I don't know. They were talking about whether they were going to resurrect it or if they thought they had enough establishing shot footage already to cover themselves.
Right.
But apparently there was only one episode where they took it out to sea. That was the one, what was it called? Audrey's. It's the one where she gets trapped down in the underbelly with Agent Howard because those two guys have taken the ship over to get something that Duke has.
Right.
The Trial of Audrey Park, I guess it's called. And the director actually took the boat out into open water for that. And apparently it was just horrible. Everybody was getting seasick. The boat was not terribly seaworthy, and so it stayed pretty much moored after that. Yeah. So that was our morning. We went out and ran around and saw all of the site locations, and I mean that was interesting just to see how this insignificant little street, it's hardly even half a block long, got used for so many different things from so many different angles, and it's a really really beautiful area.
Yeah. How does it work when they are shooting there? Are they closing down the whole street, or are they using people who live there as extra? Or
imagine it's a combination of all that. I think that this program is probably bringing a lot of money to the area, and most of the people in the area are very supportive of it. I'm sure there are some people who are inconvenienced from time to time. The street that your business is on gets shut for a day or two, or traffic is rerouted. But I think for the most part, people are quite supportive. But they do. They'll have to block off streets and redress the exteriors of buildings. Take some place that's normally a restaurant and turn it into a travel agency or something like that, just for a particular episode.
Hide all the Canadiana.
Hide all the Canadiana. Although if you look closely, every now and then a little bit of it creeps in.
Yeah.
I saw the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic on one of the early shots. And then some of the buildings next to the Haven Police Department, every now and then you see something over there which looks like it's got some Canadiana on it. And I do remember one, I think it was the Christmas episode, where there's a very prominent Nova Scotia flag flying from one of the buildings.
I guess
so they don't catch everything, but
I guess there's no Tim Hortons in that town though.
There's not. As far as I don't remember seeing one. It's a really really touristy. I mean, I don't even know if there's a McDonald's. It's a very boutique sort of place.
Right.
So having all of these unique little shops, some of them they probably don't even have to redress. They probably just take them over for a day or two.
Right.
Yeah. Do they when they are not there shooting? Is this are they bringing tourists in to show them that this is where we shoot Haven, or are they...
I don't think that they have any official tour Haven sorts of things, but people just show up all the time apparently.
Yeah.
And it's not just North Americans. The publicist told me just that week they'd had people coming in from, I don't know, the Netherlands and Austria. And, the more organized ones reach out and make contact and, they arrange a visit, whereas other times people just show up, which the publicist said, sometimes that can be inconvenient because they're doing live filming out on the streets and there's spoilers and all this sorts of things. So sort of keeping a wrap on the set for having people just show up, but they're extremely accommodating. I mean, they really rolled out the red carpet for us, and getting to sit in the chief's chair, and we were in the morgue for a while with the X-rays of some sort of troubled person's hand or something like that up on the screen behind us. Of course, we weren't allowed to take many photographs, but we did get some outside of the Grey Gull. And I really wished I'd taken some inside because it's a neat little set. But again, there's all these things. Eric Balfour's a big surfer, so if you look up at the ceiling, there's this netting and there's surfboards up there, and there's pictures of him surfing and his friends and all that sort of scattered around in different places.
Did you have to sign something that you wouldn't spoil things you had seen, or did they just
I
take your word
didn't
for it?
have to sign anything, But it's one of these publicists are said, if you spoil stuff, I'll probably lose my job. You know,
Yeah.
Just sort of guilt you into it a little bit. But
Yeah.
in my case, I had Charles Ardai vouching for me, and they sort of knew my bona fides and things like that. So other people, I don't know how they enforce it, other than appealing to people's common sense and better nature.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Bev, because you've been on the set when The Mist was filming, and so now you've been on this set. Do you notice any difference in the scale, or is it just the same kind of chaos as a movie and TV set? There's not really much difference between the two.
Well, in the afternoon, we got to go out on location where they were doing some live shooting,
Hmm.
and this was set up in a house, and it was really, really crowded because you've got, oh gosh, I don't know, 50 people maybe. You've got the makeup and the sound and the, all the various different directors and the set people, and there's just a lot of people crammed into this little thing.
Right.
The filming was actually taking place at the far end of the house, and my daughter and I were sitting in, I can't remember what they call it. It's video village, I think they call it, which is where the two cameras are, and the director of photography are sitting, and we were sitting right behind them with little microphones. And the director can't actually see the actors in that setup, but they can only
Right.
see them on the video monitors.
Yep.
They can hear them because of the microphones, but there's just a lot of stuff going on, a lot of chaos. The amazing thing to me, what I said afterwards was, the poor actors, they're sitting there, they've got people going up to them, touching up their makeup, they're running a tape measure up to their noses to take measurements, they're adjusting the lights, and there's just all this stuff going on around them. And then all of a sudden the director calls action, and just immediately they're there.
Hmm.
And it's magic. You just see them turn on, and they do take after take after take of the same scene. They move the cameras around to take it from a different angle. It's over somebody's shoulder. It's a wide shot. It's a close-up shot. Although they're doing some of that simultaneously. They've got two cameras, a wide one and a sort of a focused one.
Hmm.
They've got to hit their marks as well as say their lines, especially when there's a lot of special effects. If they're not in the right place when something happens, then the shot's ruined and they have to do it over again.
Hmm.
And I would say probably seeing The Mist, it was somewhat the same, but The Mist was a special case as well because Darabont actually had hired the film crew from The Wire, and they did that whole thing in 28 days. Filmed it almost the same way that they film a TV show.
Hmm.
Not a lot of setups for lighting between, so very fast and dirty handheld cameras. And so I've never really seen a large scale movie production where I get the impression that things are done at a much more leisurely pace.
Hmm.
But on this one, they have to deal with the chaos too. Like I said, it was raining really hard that day, so it was pounding off the roof of the house, and you've got that sound to deal with. But then there was a break, and the actors came over and talked to us, and they were just as friendly and gracious as anything. There were a couple of guest stars there for that episode, and I can't say who they are because they haven't been announced yet, but we had a lot of fun with one of them because in between the sort of tour of the area and the set visit, I sat down and did an on-camera interview with the publicist, and it's something that something they might use for promotions for the season or something that'll be on the DVD, of season 5. And one of the actors had conspired with him. They said, "Oh, I'm going to crash the interview." He's one of the guest stars, but they had sort of let me in on the surprise, so I wouldn't be totally surprised. And so he came in, and we just had a great time. He's a really funny fellow, and we just bantered. And I wasn't sure how it went from my perspective. I like to think I can be a funny guy, but I wasn't really sure. And so I asked my daughter after it was over, how was it? She said, "No, you were really funny." And so that's sort of my vote of confidence. If my
There you
daughter
go.
thought I was funny.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, that was an interesting experience too. We were in the morgue probably the better part of an hour. So I don't know how much of it'll get used for what purpose, but that was an unexpected surprise, and I'm glad to have had that experience too.
Cool. Will we see you walking down the streets of Haven in season 5 then?
Unfortunately, they didn't ask me to do a cameo. particularly because they were only doing that one scene and it was inside the house, and there was no room for some random person to just walk through. I think it was episode 7 or 8. I think it was episode 8 that they were filming. So when that episode airs, I'll say more about who I got to see. There was one of the guest stars in particular I was really, really interested to see because I'm familiar with her work from something else.
Oh, okay. Cool. And in general, do the actors, do they look taller, smaller, bit different than the cinematic version that we see to you, or?
Well, the one thing that people always say about Lucas Bryant is that he's the exact opposite of his character.
Mm-hmm.
And he is. He's very outgoing, very funny, very gregarious. But they took a group picture of my daughter and I, and he was on one end and he had his arm around my daughter, and the set photographer says, "Oh, we need to take that one again because Nathan or Lucas, he'd say, it looks like you're holding his daughter hostage." The way he had his arm around her was like she was being. But yeah, he was funny, and Emily Rose was. I don't say that I think she was taller or shorter than she seemed to be. She was she's very beautiful and very magnetic personality, and
mm-hmm.
I really wished I'd been able to meet more of the cast. Eric Balfour was gone already, and I think Duke's one of the great characters of the show. Some of his asides, the things he mutters under his breath, just hilarious. And Adam Copeland is somebody else who I think I appreciate him more on watching the series all over again than I did the first time through, because he sort of showed up in season 2 little bits here and there, and then he became more and more of a regular.
Yep.
And for somebody who, well, I don't know what his acting experience was previous to this other than, the acting component of being a WWE fighter, but I think he's really good.
Mm-hmm.
He's got this certain serious demeanor, and especially when you put him and Duke together in a scene, I really enjoy his performance.
Yeah, Hans is a big fan too.
Yeah, I like him really much. I think this is his premiere in acting, so.
He's been good right out of the gate, right from the very beginning. It's been interesting to watch his hair change over the seasons. When he first came in, he had really, really long, like wrestler hair, and it's gotten shorter and shorter. And then I just saw one of the publicity pictures for season 5, and it looks like Eric Balfour's had all of his hair cut off.
Hmm.
Oh.
He's got really short hair in that promo picture that they released for season 5.
Hmm.
So maybe he got caught, maybe he got stuck in the hole or something like that and got it pulled off or something.
Maybe got burnt off. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's awesome, and we'll look forward to finding out who the guest stars are on the episode that you happen to see filming. And
I'm going to guess that'll be maybe November by the time that one airs.
Okay.
8 episodes in is 2 months, and yeah, it'll probably be November before that comes down the pipe.
Yeah, and it's not that far away until the premiere of season 5, and looking forward to how they're going to get all this portal stuff behind them and move forward again. So we're also interested to see if William is back again.
I mean,
too.
do you get the impression from season 4 that William and Mara are responsible for starting all the troubles?
That has been a subject of discussion between me and Hans. We're kind of wondering if that's just like the outer layer of an onion story, because I don't really buy William's explanation about how the trouble started.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you feel about it, Bev.
Well, it's a theory that I'm willing to allow, that just like these characters presumably from an alternate world who came over here and decided to have a little bit of fun, but I'm also willing for there to be some other explanation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they seem to always peel back another layer that you're not expecting. So I don't totally buy his explanation to Mara about their relationship. So and they've been very cagey to not show us very much in season 4. So I think they were saving it for this season. I think we're going to find out some things that will surprise us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, that's awesome, Beth. Thank you very much for sharing that set visit with us and your thoughts about the upcoming season 5 of Haven.
Okay, my pleasure.
Yeah. We are going to talk about season 2 of Under the Dome. There's been, when we record this, episode 7 has aired. quite a lot of things have happened during those episodes, and we are going to spoil them for you. So if you haven't seen them yet, you might want to do that before you listen to this. Before we go into what's happening, we have three new characters being added. Personally, I don't know about you guys, but I was very glad to hear that Eddie Cahill, I don't know
Cahill?
if I pronounce that. Yeah, Cahill was going to be there because I liked him in CSI New York, where he played a detective. But I must say, I think he's been very disappointing in Under the Dome. Not as an actor, but his character has been. I don't know. He doesn't seem like a three-dimensional character, more like a I don't know, cardboard character.
I don't even know who he plays on the show.
Is that Sam?
He's playing Sam.
Oh,
Sam,
okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Before we dive into that too deeply, Hans, maybe we should just sort of set up what each of us thinks of the series at this point, and then we can really get into season 2 a bit more.
Yeah. Lou and I have been very clear what we think about the episodes, or the first season. And I must say that I think I had hope for season 2, mostly because King himself had written the first episode, and it was also announced pretty early on that 2 of the main characters would die in the first episode. So I was thinking that King would come in and sweep the rug away and fix things. But I'm sorry to say that I think it's been even worse this season, mostly because I don't like the new characters that's been introduced. I don't like the way the story has gone. I don't like that the Dome has been treated almost like a character. And in the last season, that people are actually getting out of the Dome. So I think the series is going downhill. I hope they wrap it up in this second season and be done with it.
How about you, Bev?
Well, I don't have really strong feelings about it one way or another. And I think probably the best indicator of how I look at it is when Breaking Bad ran, my wife liked to watch it as well, but often couldn't see the episodes until 4 or 5 days after they aired. I couldn't wait that long. I always had to watch Breaking Bad either as it aired or the next day. And then I'd watch them again with her. With Under the Dome, my wife, again, likes the series, but I'm perfectly happy to wait 4 or 5 days, sometimes even a week or two to watch the episodes. So it really doesn't have me gripped the way that some of the better TV series have.
Right.
This whole idea of adding characters suddenly appear. The one thing we have to take into account is the timeline. I mean, the whole first season only comprised 2 weeks, even though to us it seemed like it went on for months. So I guess it's not beyond the pale, but some of the new characters I tend to agree I don't like very much. I really don't like the school teacher.
Yeah.
Even though her sort of viewpoint as the rational scientist would be the one that I would espouse in that situation, but she's just an annoying character.
Yeah.
Sam, clearly there's lots of mystery going on with him, but now that he's out of the Dome and there's all this other stuff going on. But yeah, I agree that there's not so much depth there. I was really, really unhappy to see Angie go. I thought Angie was one of the vibrant, interesting characters, very feisty, very fiery, and she brought a lot of life to the show. And I'm not so happy with the on-again, off-again relationship between Julia and
Barbie.
It's over such a short period of time, they've really turned that almost into a soap opera kind of relationship where it's love me one week and hate me the next. And you have to realize, again, thinking back to the time frame, she was married just 3 weeks ago. Yeah. Barbie just killed her husband, 2.5 weeks ago, and she's already having all of these other weird things going on. So the time dilation doesn't always work even in the time frame of the TV show. I think they sometimes forget how little time has elapsed.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I know you and I, Lou, have spoken about this, that they are very bad in showing that they wanted how much time has passed. Like they could have done day 1 or day 2 in some text for the shows.
I mean, well, at least they've kind of added in the opening dialogue that Barbie does that we've been here 2 weeks. At least, finally, now we know how long they've been there. Because if you didn't have that in the opening credits, you wouldn't know how long they'd been there.
I think in the first season, the assumption was that each episode represented a day.
Yeah. But
And
they
so
still should have
13
just done that. Then they should have
Yeah.
said Monday, Tuesday, like just to, because we don't know that. We don't see a calendar. We don't see a clock. We don't see
No.
anything. And like you said, the time passage for us is way different than the pace the show is operating under. So you're just kind of like feeling like you've been there for years and they've only been there for a week. So, and that distance between what you're seeing and what they're presenting makes it really hard for you to buy into some of the relationships, because it's just like, really, like you're doing this now and you've only been together like this short period of time, but it feels like years sometimes. And it's just, yeah, it's like they forget that like Big Jim is gunned down at some defense of, like a woman and whatnot. And they didn't see it, but he let a woman drown as well.
Mhm.
So like, and then they're kind of like, oh, one week we're friends, and then the next week we're enemies, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah,
It's a little bit
it's-
chaotic.
yeah, it just doesn't hold
Yeah.
together, and none of the characters' motivations make sense. And like with Haven, I've got no problem if they take something from King and adapt it and go off in a different direction. But you got to be consistent with what you're doing. And because we don't know what the dome is, all these things that come up, it just seems like we talked about it in Haven again. It just feels like with this show, they're just really making it up as they go along to the nth degree.
The thing with Haven was that the creators and the executive producers had an experience of doing this before.
Yes.
Many of them were involved in the Dead Zone TV
Yeah,
series.
exactly.
And that one was something that was even more faithful to the source material,
Yep.
in that the characters were all the characters from it, and
Mhm.
even though they went off in all their myriad directions, the core of it was still the novel. And
Yep.
so Haven sort of represents the next generation in that evolution. You take the novel as an inspiration and then you sort of throw it away and create this self-contained, logical, mostly,
Mhm.
situation. Whereas Under the Dome, I'm not really sure what they're trying to do.
Right.
And
And that's the problem.
And the problem, well, yeah, and the problem always is if they don't have a fixed endpoint in mind and a fixed time scale they're shooting toward,
Yeah.
they end up with what happened in Lost in season 3, where you just throw in new characters and tread water because you can't answer too many of the mysteries and you can't advance the plot too much because you can't get too close to the end because you've got all this extra, unknown number of seasons to do. So I'm starting to be of the opinion that TV shows of this sort really should have a fixed endpoint.
I agree.
And I think even Haven needs that at some point. And whether it's at the end of this 26 or not, you either have to keep pulling rabbits out of the hat to artificially keep the story going, or you say, okay, this is it now. We know where we're headed, and we're going to get you there, and then we're going to wrap it up, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And the thing that disappoints me about Under the Dome, and before the show started, maybe my expectations were too high. But like you just mentioned, because the creative people behind this show were coming from Lost, I would have thought that they would have been really locked into a good storyline for this series. But it's not showing that at all, which is really disappointing for me. And I have to say, the thing I come back to, and the strongest point of King's stories are his characters. In this show, like you said, there's the relationships are just basically soap opera. One week, characters are mad at each other, and the next week they're all lovey-dovey. They seem to conveniently forget people have done major crimes. Like this last episode, we saw the radio guy, Phil, I believe his name is. This guy is like your prototypical, he was played like a prototypical flower child, peace-loving beatnik. Now we see him put on a cop uniform and he's shooting people at the slightest provocation. Like there's just no consistency. I don't believe in any of these characters. If they do something out of left field, it's just kind of like, yeah, well, that's where the show's taken us. And I have to admit, I was like, this show to me is so bad. It's good. Like it's an unintentional comedy most of the time. And I was really down on the season, and I talked a little bit to Hans about it, until this last episode kind of brought me back in a little bit, because I thought this whole thing from the previous episode with the tunnel behind the lockers, I was going, are you guys serious? You're going to have this whole structure behind this. It's like right behind the locker. It's not like it's behind a wall. It's right behind the locker. But then you find out in this episode that it's actually the dome that's doing this. Okay, now that's kind of cool. Like that sounded planned out, but
and this Zenith tie-in between Barbie and the mysterious girl out of the out of the past.
Yeah, so that kind of pulled me back in a little bit,
and also opening it out into that new setting. Putting Barbie and Sam in Zenith, walking around in the real world.
Yeah,
that adds, all sorts of new possibilities.
And it was a kick to see the guy that plays his father was on Lost for a couple of
Yes.
episodes as well.
Yep.
So that was all kind of cool. So I was all ready to come on here and really rip, and we have kind of, but this last episode, it kind of like, this is kind of cool. Like now we're going somewhere with this stuff. I mean, there's still a lot of things that are just crazy. Like you all said, the science teacher, Rachel, she's just a horrible character, just so inconsistent. But yeah, that tunnel thing actually turned out to be something kind of cool.
And I have no problem at all with the fact that they've completely departed from the novel right from the very beginning. Although a lot of people do. A lot of people objected to that strongly from the very beginning. And that doesn't bother me at all. Tell me a good story. Use this as the inspiration.
Exactly.
Run off with it and do all sorts of new, interesting, creative things with it. And maybe they're getting to that point now. And I'm willing. We're only halfway through the second season, so there's time for all sorts of interesting things to still happen.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. My problem isn't that they are going away from the novel, but I think they are going in the wrong direction.
Well, how do we know? We don't know what the direction is.
No, but I
that's the problem they have. They have no direction until this last episode.
But I'm a little bit against what you're saying. I don't like the fact that they are using the dome as a character that can build tunnels behind lockers in schools, and the fact that they are getting out of the dome. I think that is the wrong way to go. I think that the good thing about the story is seeing people being trapped under the dome, and more like if someone has just put a dome over them, not that the dome can do stuff and decide things and create tunnels and stuff like that. I don't. That is my biggest problem, that they have actually made the dome into like a character that can do things and change things.
Well, wait, is it the dome, or is it like in King's novel, something beyond the dome? I mean, the characters are assuming it's the dome. But in King's novel, there was this extra force that was able to do things.
Yeah.
So that answer, the characters are assuming it's the dome.
Mm-hmm.
But is it really?
Yeah. The only thing is, this better not be a government test, or I'll be really. I mean, the extraterrestrial thing is out there, but at least it's consistent with the book. If this is just something the government's doing, that will really.
Well, and the other aspect is, once Barbie gets back into town and starts talking to people.
Yeah.
His father said, "Oh, this is the most earth-shattering thing that's ever happened in all of humanity," but you don't get that sense. Life seems to be going on. No. Whereas on the TV series Leftovers, which the guy from Lost, Damon Lindelof, is doing,
right?
That's one where an episode of this type happens in the past, and it's completely inexplicable, but you can't ignore that it happened.
Mm-hmm.
3% or 2% of the Earth's population just vanished one day.
Right.
And it's not about why did that happen or how did that happen. It's about how something earth-shattering like this completely knocks people off kilter.
Yeah.
Your life is never quite the same again. Things that used to be important aren't important anymore. And I think Under the Dome really lost that opportunity of that sense of just everything that you thought you believed about reality is not true anymore, both for the people inside the dome and for the people out in the real world now.
Yeah. They really dropped the outside aspect. I mean, I can understand it. You have to cut a TV show. You can only show so much, but once in a while it would have been kind of nice to get an outside perspective on how it was impacting the rest of the world. I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
And plus, they've done all sorts of dumb things inside the dome that, in the novel, spelled the end of them. The science teacher goes off and sets fire to the fields. Well, that's sort of the way the novel ended. The fire sucked all the oxygen out of the place, and that was game over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that they dropped the whole drug running thing. Maybe it's still going to come into play, but I would have thought that would have played out a little bit by now, that they were producing whatever they were doing. I can't remember now which one. Was it meth? I think meth. Yeah. So I was expecting that storyline to play out a little bit too, but
they mentioned a bit when Barbie flew the plane and to switch over to the extra gas tanks, and that was in there because the extra gas tanks were used to fly the meth.
I think that was the low point of the season for me. When the wingtip scratched along the dome and the plane still stayed in one piece, I was going, "Are you guys serious? How can he fly away from it? He can't even see it." There's just stuff like that. You just kind of roll your eyes. But,
And let's fill the air full of toxic chemicals while we're at it.
yeah, really. Yeah. So it's funny because me and Hans have been reviewing Haven off and on basis, and we've been critical of certain elements of it. But then when you look at what they've done compared to what's going on with Under the Dome, which has the power of one of the big three networks behind it, it's amazing the job that Haven's done in retrospect and in holding its mythology together in a relatively coherent manner.
And I sort of had in my mind that with Haven, that the first season was more like a monster of the week thing.
Yeah.
That they hadn't really developed a mythology until moving forward. But as I watch it now, going back to the beginning, they were building that mythology up all the way along.
Mm-hmm.
And not being as overt about it, because when you're starting a show out, you don't always want to have viewers have to see the episode,
every episode, yeah,
or every episode at all. But they had a plan, I think, and the plan may have changed and morphed over the years, but they weren't just doing X-Files Monster of the Week thing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was sort of funny in the episode where Agent Howard is talking to Audrey and making her account for her actions there. And she brings up this other FBI agent who believed in UFOs and, how he started out okay, but in the last couple of years he showed on off his rocker. And that was sort of like a funny poke at the X-Files.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I think a lot of shows, I mean, Fringe was like that too. I think the first season, they really try to make them standalone. So the audiences haven't discovered it somewhere along the point of the first season can still plug in and not feel lost. And once they've done that and they've built up an audience and they've got them to know the characters, then they can start to serialize it more and get more meaty stuff working. So I think that's a good approach. It's frustrating at times because I prefer serialized storytelling over standalone episodes. I'm not a procedural person, so it's a tough mix. But in retrospect, Haven has done a fairly good job. And like you said, Dead Zone, I thought did a fantastic job to the last season because they really fleshed out the Gregson storyline and put some interesting twists on things that happen in the book and really fleshed them out. Like I thought they really did a wonderful job with that series.
Well, creating that whole dynamic that wasn't in the book.
Yeah.
To have Bannerman marry Sarah and raise Johnny's son.
Yeah.
And that triangle situation really added a whole extra level to the TV series, which you sort of need. If you're going to be going on for years and years and years.
Yeah. All right, so this was a real fun conversation about these two shows, both based on Stephen King works, but with wildly different results, at least until this point. And it's obviously way too early to say at this point on one episode, but for the first time this season in Under the Dome, I'm actually intrigued as to where they're going next, whereas before it was like, oh, I got to watch these episodes because we have to review them. So...
What do you think about Junior's mother and the fact that she knew about the dome and did all these paintings of pink stars and stuff? Is she an alien?
Well, it's clearly something that they've had planned from the very beginning because the reveal about her paintings came mid-first season.
Mm-hmm.
Is she an alien? I don't think so because she was married to Junior's father and she's got a brother and she's certainly well-rooted. But King has no shortage of characters who are tapped into the alternate dimension. They know things that other people don't or can't know.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Sherry Stringfield as an actress. She was on St. Elsewhere?
Right.
And I've always sort of liked her. She's got this sort of husky voice and sort of a charming, beaming face, and you like her straight off. So I'll be interested to see what they do with her. But as for why she knows and what she knows and how long she's known, clearly this dome stuff has been going on for a lot longer because Sam and Lyle and
Melanie,
they all knew about this egg thing from way back.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of Lyle, I just love that guy. When you get a country singer, to act, you don't always have high expectations, but I think he was really good.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they didn't leave him in a very good position at the end of the last episode.
No, to be sure.
So, do you think it will be renewed for a third season?
It sells well internationally. It probably makes money on Amazon Video on Demand thing. I think as long as people display a willingness to pay for it, above and beyond the general broadcast stuff. In most TV shows, they have to finance themselves through advertising. Mm-hmm. And if the viewership falls off in one market, then that could lead to cancellation. But if they've done some smart stuff with this series and they've pre-sold it internationally and they're making a lot of money off it, I think if everybody in America stopped watching it, it could still go on because it's, financially successful.
And it's
So-
still a number one rated show in its time slot.
Well, yeah, and
it's
there's
lost a
not much
lot of
competition.
audience, but it's
Yeah, in the
still,
summertime, there's not much else on.
Yeah.
So it's worthwhile. Like I said, I don't rush to watch it. It's on past my bedtime on Monday night, so I don't watch it maybe until Friday night or Wednesday night if my wife's got some spare time. But I
Mhm.
don't hate it.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of tagging along, see where they're going, but I'm not totally absorbed by it either.
Yeah.
How do you think, a lot of people, me included, think that the ratings have much to do with the fact that it airs in the summer where it doesn't really have much competition?
I think
How do you
it's
think
true.
how do you think it would stand out if it, say, were aired like in October or in the
If it had
fall
been on,
when
if it had been on against Breaking Bad, I think it would have died a very fast death.
yeah.
Yeah. If it had something really strong running against it, it's possible it would have dipped even further. It's hard to say. We can make things up and say, in that scenario maybe, but
Yeah, because you don't know what night they would put it on what the competition would be. It's kind of tough to say. I
No.
would think generally its numbers would probably be down whatever the normal drop would be for a show moving to that time period. But
yeah. It's like Extant, that new Spielberg series Extant with Halle
Yeah.
Berry. It's reviewing really well, but doesn't have a very big audience, and so they shifted it an hour later because it was up against one of these, Dances with the Stars or some wildly popular thing, and so they've only done that for a couple of weeks now. So it remains to be seen whether that's going to pull it out of the doldrums or not. It might be a little bit too late for it.
yeah, and the TV market is so different today too. There's all these alternative methods of getting your stuff out there, whether it's through streaming and whatnot. I think the model of selling a show through DVD, that kind of profit margin's gone away, but people can watch shows. They can tape it. They can wait for it to show up on Netflix. There's just so many different
I hardly
ways.
ever watch anything live anymore.
Yeah, same here.
Maybe because if it's on in Central, if it's on at 7 or 8 o'clock, I'll watch it. If it's on at 9, which is when all the really good stuff is on, I don't usually watch it live. I'll watch it somewhere within the next week. But
Yeah.
and they get credit for that. If you record it on your home system, if you rewatch it, then if they're tracking that sort of thing, they get credit for that. That's why the numbers and the ratings sometimes get updated a day or two later. But yeah, I mean, they realize that so many people are now time shifting.
Yeah. And the expectations about what constitutes a hit are constantly changing because 10 years ago or whatever, you needed like 10 million people, 15 million people. Now they're happy if they get 4 or 5. So
Because there's so many networks out there now. I mean, I don't know what the numbers for Haven on Sci-Fi are. There's certainly nothing.
They're 1 point something usually.
Yeah. But for Sci-Fi, that's probably really, really good.
Yep.
When shows like Breaking Bad were on, if their numbers, if they'd been on a network competing against other network shows, they probably would have gotten canceled because they didn't have huge numbers, but they had huge numbers for that network.
Yeah. The only show that's got big numbers across the board is The Walking Dead, which I think it's 10 plus million numbers, which is unusual and quite understandable why that AMC is so behind that series.
Yeah.
Okay, so anything else about Haven or Under the Dome that you wanted to mention, Bev?
I'm just having a good time watching it all over again and picking out all the King references. And then some of them are pretty overt and some of them are really, really subtle. For example, I realized, and I've never seen anybody else mention this, there was the season 1 episode where the harbor master kept having all these babies. And if you look in her office, when they show her document on the wall that's got her like harbor master certificate, it's Stephen King's signatures on it.
Oh.
But then there's other things like, I mean, there's lots of Dark Tower references, especially in season 4. The idea of the standing doorway in the middle of the field was very much a drawing of the 3 kind of thing, and the concept of the soft spot between worlds that had been opened, sort of a thinny sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I found interesting when I talked to the Marvel people about their graphic adaptation of the Dark Tower, sometimes the artists would draw in things that they pulled from other places and then they had to take them out because they hadn't licensed those things. They don't seem to be operating under the same restrictions here. To have a scene from it, for example, almost completely recreated on the TV on Haven, they seem to have free reign to do that, and they're having a good time with it. So that's fun. That's a lot of fun. Actually, if you go to the Sci-Fi website, they've got a whole section devoted to breaking down all of the subtle and overt King references in each episode.
Oh, cool. Cool. Yeah, I was almost kind of expecting maybe that the portal from the end of season 4 and the cave in the Underdome episode might have linked up to each other. We could have had a crossover episode.
Yeah. They ended up in Haven when they fell down the hole.
Yeah.
We're better off back under the dome.
Yeah.
One of the things I really liked about season 4 was Haven was when Lexi came across. And of course she's Audrey, but she's Lexi, and so she's got a certain freedom to speak her mind.
Yeah.
And her analysis of Haven in that Lexi vernacular. Why the hell does anybody still live here?
Yeah.
It was like the audience through her. Everybody's saying,
exactly. Yeah.
another gas leak. This place has got the worst gas system ever.
Well, it's just amazing how much Stephen King stuff there is out there, and not just in the TV, but the books that King's putting out too. Like I think we're going to talk about in the news. Mr. Mercedes is going to be a 10 episode series. So, and we've got, of course, that new series based on, I guess, The Shop with Charlie. So that will be interesting.
One that's being pitched about New York Times at bargain rates too.
That too, yeah. So,
which is by the same guys who created Haven.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one thing I'll say for Haven that I think Under the Dome is severely lacking, it's a sense of humor.
Yep.
Haven, there's lots of really, really funny moments, even in the midst of all this crazy stuff. Somebody will just say something, and it's funny, and they don't take themselves 100% seriously. Where Under the Dome, I think, is very little light material going on.
Yeah, they could have a lot of fun with like Melanie, the fact that she's dead. They could really, and came back. They like Junior had a line that was really awkward. He says, "Well, you're for somebody who was dead and came back," or something like that. But they could have a lot of fun with that, and they don't play with it at all. Everything's so serious.
And actually, if you go back to the Haven Christmas episode,
that's
Under the Dome.
Yeah.
They're inside the snow globe. They've got the birds bashing off the wall and crashing to the ground, and they're trapped inside this dome. I think they did Under the Dome in that one episode better, maybe, than the big series is.
Yeah.
They certainly did it first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. I feel sorry for Underdome in the way, because just from my perspective, I was expecting like the next Lost with it, and that hasn't really materialized. And I think that's an unfair expectation. So
plus they had one of the main creative people left after the end of the first season, so what does that mean? They always say it's to spend time with his family or something. There's always some reason put up, but you have to wonder, was there some sort of creative differences that happened, different opinions about how the show should go? So, just never know.
Yeah, Hans was very suspicious about that.
and I read, actually, it was interesting because when season 1 was over, a time after that, there were interviews with both, I don't remember their names, but both the creators, and they had a very different look back on the season 1, where the guy who is still there,
Jack Bender,
it was very positive, and the guy who isn't there was more like, well, there were things we could have done differently, it could have been this and that, and then he left. So I wasn't really surprised when I heard he left after reading those interviews.
Well, and the other thing that you have to realize is there's layers upon layers upon layers of people who stick their nose into this thing. There's not just the writers, there's not just the directors, there's not just the showrunners, there's the networks, there's the network distributors. Everybody gets a crack at it at some level. And so no one person's vision running the whole thing. Maybe gets tugged and pulled in different directions by different people. And if you're lucky on a show like Breaking Bad, where you've got Vince Gilligan, and he seemed to be able to have the vision and the wherewithal to sort of run his course and get what he wanted. Whereas like a big network show like this, there's probably a lot of different forces at play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm really think the future of, especially stuff like from Stephen King, I think the future of it really lies on cable networks, which are less, as you said, Bev, less committee driven. Though when they start getting big, we've seen troubles behind the scenes on The Walking Dead as well. So when something gets big, everybody wants to get a piece of the pie and get their input into it. So it's tough to get a unified vision sometimes.
Yeah, and it's a little sad, I think, that whenever they do a TV series now, they are always aiming for it to go on and on and on. Like with Under the Dome, they should have done like a 13 episodes miniseries and then be done with it, and then they could have told the story from start to beginning and everything. It seems today that they always want to keep going as far as they can, and I think that's it's bad for the story itself.
And that can be done in different ways. So this last year we've seen 2 series, True Detective and Fargo, which were both completely self-contained in about 10 episodes each. And yet that's not the end for either one of them. They're both going to go on next year, but it's sort of like a Twilight Zone
anthology.
An anthology. So it's new characters, new setup. And the other series that's done that in a different way is American Horror Story, where it's like a Desperation Regulators thing. You've got the same actors playing different parts from one season to the next.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it, I think.
You kind of almost would have expected with Under the Dome, they would have said, we're going to go for 3 seasons, and that's it. I mean, that's what Lost was waiting for, and they finally got that end date. So, and I just want to clarify, Bev, you mentioned that Haven, because I took the news that they got renewed for 2 seasons as those would be the last 2 seasons. Are you saying that there might be more seasons after those 2? Or
I don't think that's been decided. I haven't seen anybody come out and definitively say, well, and again, sort of vague what we're talking about seasons here. They're treating these 26 episodes all as season 5, where to my mind it's going to be almost like season 5 and season 6.
Yeah, that's what I took it as.
And they did it with Breaking Bad too. You've got your 8 and your 8, and it's all season 5. But the distinction between what's one season and what's the next, I guess maybe depends on where you end the first half of it. But I don't think anybody has clearly come out and said that these 26 are the last 26. But I wouldn't object to them doing that.
No, I
as
would
much
like
as I
it.
enjoy it, I think at some point they need to do the Lost thing and figure out where they're going with all this.
Yeah, and it's always good when they can do a controlled ending, that they know that they are going to end it and not being cancelled.
That would be the worst thing. I'd really hate that if they didn't wrap things up and then somebody come along and said, "Oh, sorry, that's it, no more."
Yeah, kind of like Dead Zone.
Yeah.
And Audrey can only be so many different characters before that kind of gets old, and I think they're at the limit myself.
But I'm really growing to appreciate her as an actress in watching this now all at once. To see how different she was as Sarah.
Yep.
And we didn't really get to see her as Lucy very much for any great length, but that one episode with her as Sarah, and then the whole different, she's completely different as Lexi. She, twiddles with her hair, and she's got this laid-back, drawly way of talking. And what was fun, one of the things that they gave us when we went to visit the set was it was a DVD that had only the episodes called Real Estate, the one about the haunted house. And then there was a complete an hour and a half behind the scenes making of on the same disc. And in that episode, Lucy reappears, the one where the guy turns into the house. And he's sort of haunting his own house. And so she has these flashbacks to when Lucy handled that same situation 27 years earlier. And the way that Emily Rose went back to watch whatever scenes she had done in the past as Lucy to make sure that she recaptured the way that she had played that character. I found that very interesting.
Hey, I'm glad you brought that up. It reminds me that I didn't mention it, but I think over the course of the series, Emily Rose, she's really grown into that role. I think in the first season, she was probably the one out of the 3 leads that had the most trouble finding her character. And then that might have been because the showrunners couldn't tell her everything that they wanted to at that point. But I think she really grew into that role. And by the time we got to the second season, she had really stepped up her game.
Yeah, but you also have to consider the character in context, too.
Absolutely.
In the mythos, when she appeared in Haven, that's the creation of Audrey Parker. She didn't exist before that.
Yeah.
So for her to absorb the memories of the person whose memories she had taken on and become a full-fledged character, if you want to hand wave, you can do things that way.
Yeah. Alrighty. So that was a lot of fun. That we covered a lot of ground out and beyond just these 2 shows. And I'm going to put you on the spot, Bev. Have you read King's next book yet?
I have. I just finished it Thursday night, I think.
Ooh. Thumbs up?
Thumbs up. Thumbs way up.
All right.
It's I won't say anything about it other than the fact it really has a very different feel to it.
Okay.
It's almost like the voice is subtly different from anything I can really put my finger on.
Hmm.
And it's strongly rooted in the King mythos, in the sense that Mr. Mercedes, any references to King things like The Shining or Christine, those were to the fictional elements.
Mm-hmm.
The movie Christine, it was the King fiction within the real world, and which was
Right.
appropriate for a novel that had nothing supernatural in it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in this one, it takes place partly in Harlow, Maine, lots of place from the King mythical Maine, and there are little tads and pieces of crossovers to other parts of the King mythos. But you will probably hear people on the message boards who've read it talk about what a dark book it is. And King himself has said, he doesn't even want. He said he doesn't even want to think about it anymore, and he wants to walk away from it.
Right.
And so that makes you think about Pet Sematary.
Yep. I was thinking that.
And I won't say that they're wrong in that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a gradually, Pet Sematary had this sense of dread right from the very beginning.
Yes.
Whereas in Revival, it really sort of builds more gradually until the end of it is just like, holy crap. Really, the last 30 or 40 pages, everything just amazing, just astonishing.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, like we said when we were reviewing Mr. Mercedes, I said I'm looking at this one as kind of like the appetizer because I like the book, but detective stuff isn't really my jam. But as soon as I heard the plot for this one, I said, this sounds like older King type story. So I was
and maybe it is. I mean, maybe the voice is sort of getting back to some of his earlier, and I'd really like to talk to him a little bit or hear him interviewed about where the story came from and what was in his mind when he wrote it, because he did talk quite extensively about the inspiration for Mr. Mercedes.
Yes.
And I'd like to hear this sort of the similar interviews for Revival.
I'm sure they'll be forthcoming as we get closer to the book, but yeah, cool. All right. Well, you've got me salivating.
Yeah. How would you rank it? Is it?
Oh, I'm very bad at that. I'm very bad at ranking things. Is it top 10? Is it top 20? I don't know. My mind freezes when I try to do those things. And it's too soon. I've just finished it. So, I really enjoyed it. And I really want to go back and look at it again. I think people are going to love it.
Awesome.
Sounds great.
Well, thanks a lot, Bev. I think you've got all our listeners on edge now, so that's awesome. Always leave them wanting more, and we've done that. And you've done that quite elegantly for us. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, as always.
And it's awesome, always awesome to have you back on the show. And I guess maybe when Revival comes out, we might have you back again.
That would be great. That'd be
awesome.
Great. Okay. And maybe at the end of season 5 of Haven, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And maybe at the end of the season of Under the Dome. No, I think we'll pass on that. Unless something miraculous happens, and then we'll have to get together.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks a lot, Bev.
Okay.
Thanks.
And one more thing before we go, I just wanted to mention that I will be, for the first time in my life, attending DragonCon at the end of this month, end of August, up until the Labor Day weekend. And I will also be on a Stephen King panel, which tentatively is assigned for Sunday, August 31st. So if you're going to be at DragonCon, here's your chance to look me up. Maybe you don't want to see me. But if you do, and you're thinking of attending that panel, I will be there. Keep an eye on the schedule because things have a tendency to change at DragonCon, but I will be there representing our podcast. So that will be a lot of fun, and I hope to get some great interactions with some of the fans there and listeners. And I hope also to record that panel, and we'll hopefully get to use it as part of a upcoming Stephen King podcast down the road. So if you're at DragonCon this year, check me out.
Ask him some hard questions at the panel.
No, I want softballs only, please. I need Hans for backup if that's going to happen. That wraps up podcast episode 34. The summer is over, and Hans and I are back together, and we will be bringing you podcasts on a more regular basis. And on the schedule for our next podcast is a review of the Stephen King short story, That Bus is Another World, an interesting title. It's a short story. And we're also going to look at a little scene and probably very little known direct-to-video movie, You Can't Kill Stephen King. That is the end of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a king-sized return for us. Haha, get the pun. And once again, we want to thank Bev Vincent for returning. Always great to have Bev on. He always had such interesting insights, and look forward to that. Want to thank everybody for listening to this one. Hope you enjoyed it. But remember, stay safe.
But stay scared.